Right, this is another episode of Hot Take Point Made, League of Legends edition, and it is the first one when Worlds is completely wrapped. We obviously did one before Worlds, we did one partway through, and then we decided, it's actually a better decision, not to do one during the playoffs, because at that point, like, it's going to, first of all, if you make the hot takes too specific to playoffs, they have a lifespan of 1 week. And then secondly, actually better to just wrap up the whole tournament, isn't it? Now we've got everything to play with from the playoffs. And obviously, as usual, there's plenty of opportunity to get spicy. Spoiler, this is, at the time I'm recording this, I know this will really blow people's minds. Because all the haters of me are like, I'd love to see Thorin's face if Faker wins the world. There's only one of all, you idiot. Like, I already survived the whole time. So, it must be your first day on the internet if you think the following things will wreck me. People saying Reckless is a great AD carry. TSM, I know that doesn't even happen anymore. The TSM winning championships take is now so old. It's about fucking, I guess they did with that 2021 Keire. I guess I have to mention that one. But aside from that, they don't even win champ. But the idea these things will tilt me, like, how are they going to tilt me? Is it your first day on the internet? I've been dealing with this my whole career, so don't worry about that. And the joke of all jokes is this. TSM and Faker are actually a relatively modern phenomenon in my career. I used to have to deal with annoying people being said they were the best in like 2006. The joke is, none of you even know who I'm referring to, so I don't even have to say the name. So, spoiler, I win all the battles in the end. Because in the end, there only is, like, you know, the ending of the Titanic, Keire. Instead of that, it's like instead of some old woman who was just a bitch and just fucked over some young working class guy, left him to die, took all the wealth that he could have used probably to build a business, entrepreneurship or so. She just hid that, held it, didn't even deal with her own husband and her family, kept that wealth hidden away, then just in some whorish display of her folly of youth, just told fucking her grandkids some story, and then she threw the diamond away. Unlike that, mate, the difference is at the end of the esports story, I have all the gems as well, but they're all the gems I created from esports history and narratives. It's just old man Thorin, you know, like Gandalf writing away some manuscript, you know, and then they all agreed Faker was the second greatest player ever after Rookie. The end. That's like the end of League of Legends. Like, well, you know what? If they'd have been around, they could have stopped me, but it's too late now. Tell you what, they should have got me on all that political shit 25 years ago, but too late. Then that's the end of League of Legends. Then I open up Smite 2, the real best esports game. That's the biggest joke of all. So I made Smite a relevant esports game in the future, as if it ever was one. Right, so here's the question though, boys. Because on my other show, Hot Take Point Made, the co-hosts have gotten too comfortable, right? And so what I've noticed they're all doing is, they always start with like the weakest take they've got, right? Like the shitty one. And then they just like build towards, like, oh my God, every single one. I think we do the opposite. Because we've been off for a few weeks, I want someone to come with a good take. Like, give me a hot, I don't want to start with the weakest one. It doesn't have to be your best one, but give me your hot take. Who's got the first hot take of the show?
I'll emulate myself. I don't care. Right? You know, if this one T1's year is a categorical failure. I don't give a fuck what anyone had to say.
Wait a minute. So just the opening gambit goes, right? This is good, Keire, because even I'm like, are you fucking kidding me, bro? Like, yeah. So the opening gambit is T1's 2024 was a complete, like, what I'm just saying about a complete failure, including winning worlds, right? Including
Yes.
Hey, come on then, hit me with this shit, okay.
No. And here's the thing, Thorn, I was actually on your show with Valdez, and I said this, so I'm not even retrospectively saying this, by the way. I actually said this with Valdez at the time. People like Zeus, people like Keire, people like Faker, like Letho, like they actually need to like show that they can be the great players like Chove and Nightcan and Ben for the whole year. And Zeus failed like this individually. Owner was really, really good this year, but Keire had like a crazy collapse in the summer split, along with Faker as well. And then you look at it, they placed well at in a bunch of stuff, but they won one championship, very close in like game 5, and they only won Worlds. But this team,
are we ignoring EWC? We're just going to say that's not included in the.
I'm
okay. They did win that though, but yeah, okay, I get you. That wasn't the right circuit. Okay.
Would you call it? And if you just if you look at the rest of because it's very different, right? When this team were the rookies and choosing to stay together.
Sure, yeah.
But now, as you keep on staying together and not changing the roster, the expectations keep coming up because you're basically saying, I am choosing all of these players as T1 rather than the rest of the pool of
I see what you mean, right, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
So you're choosing to have these players on the roster rather than like switching them out, right, okay? And because you think this is the best 5-man lineup T1 can make, because they have the monopoly.
Oh, and by the way, they paid a lot of money for the lineup too. Yeah. It's not like like it was cheap either. Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Right? So the expectations, because everyone's like, oh, but like they were all picked up as rookies. I was like, yes, and then they chose to re-sign them all again and again and again. So the expectations come up. And I said this at the start of the year, the expectations of, yeah, and they are winning Worlds, which is the most important, but the whole thing of just winning one tournament isn't good enough for this like T1 lineup. Like they need to have like extended like periods of like greatness, of like trying to like string together like an actual dynastic like year. Like they're the team that should be, honest to God, like challenging and trying to put together like the golden road, rather than just a flash in the pan.
Okay, what do you think, Zaboutine? Wasn't actually as crazy as usual when he explained it as it sounded initially. Come on, what do you think?
I can't. I mean, it's they won Worlds, right, against Genji,
the
BLG.
best teams, bro, the best teams in the world. Yeah, I know.
I feel like there is. I think advocating that the year of T1 or the whole project of this roster has been underwhelming in comparison to their peak performance is overall, I think on the span of 3 years, I would say you can make a case for that, saying that like the year has been more than they've achieved. You can definitely like make a case for these T1 roster underachieving to some extent, right? Because they started strong, like doing the perfect split and things like this. So you really were expecting, everybody was expecting like the most dominant roster ever. And if people consider this one the best roster in the world, it hasn't been the most dominant one, right? Like if you consider by best peaking at the right time and beating all the best teams in the most important tournament, definitely you can say that, but hasn't been the most dominant. And you can give that, but come on, like you cannot say like this is a complete failure. It's like how many shots you have in a year, right? It's like you have spring, summer, MSI, Worlds, and EWC. I mean, you don't want to count it. They win 2 out of the 5, including the most important one. Beat their direct rival on the biggest stage. Beat the best team in the world. I would say like BLG over the span of the year, if you look at like the best team, has been the most consistent one, right? Back-to-back runner-up in international finals. Locally dominant, seed 1 of the LPL both times. So it's like if it's not Genji, it's BLG, right? It's like the case for the best team in the world over the span of the year. So I would say, I think you can definitely say that like this roster is very frustrating to deal with because they only peak 3 weeks in a year, and delivering on League of Legends is not only like about being good the 15th of October, but I would say it is, for me, I can't defend the fact that it's a bad year for T1. Like I straight can't do it. Thorin, you can help me, but on this one,
bro, yeah,
I think it's a great year for them.
Go on then, come on.
I hold teams, by the way, to really high standards, Zaboutine. Because I even said to Thorin at the start of this year, the Gen G have to look at this as also like a massive failure in the context of all the players that they had. And like BLG is the closest, but even then they was like probably disappointed. When you have Knight and Ben as your solo laners, like, and you then build a core around them, right? At the end of the day, the whole idea is that like you are supposed to attempt to be unbelievably like dominant, and they were very, very good, but they also like fell short. The problem is like T1 is those teams, but even worse. As in, like, they won at the very, very end where they like peaked and they were very, very good at that like peak. But the rest of the year, when just using their eyes, like all of summer reg, MSI, some of summer playoffs, they failed in spring finals, like all of that, like those are all like big failures for this roster. And I think a lot of people are getting caught up in the emotions of them finally winning at like the top, without actually looking at like what the expectations were at the start of the year, because they came in as the best team in the world because they just won Worlds, and then they had no continuation of that.
But this way, like all great hot takes, I actually think this is why it's a great hot take, Zaboutine. I don't agree with it, which means it probably is a well-crafted hot take. But as I said, once he started to explain it, it wasn't as crazy as it initially sounded. Like the real problem with the hot take is you can do the exact same take, and I would almost agree with it like 85%. If you just made it this right, I would phrase it differently because it actually has the same effect, Keire. It's just that then the idiots can't go, but they won Worlds, the most important tournament, because that's the easiest counter right now to what you're saying. Like I agree with Zaboutine. I'm sorry, if you rank the tournaments that I want to win, obviously, doesn't matter who we are, Worlds is number one. And if I do win Worlds, it could never be a failure of a year. Like, it could be that it wasn't as successful as it could be. I would phrase it this way. I would have said this, Keire. I would say that actually 2024 is still underwhelming for T1. Because then people would go, what? No, that can't be. But then what you do is then you build it like you did. You go, well, first of all, I'm saying 2024, not the whole roster lineup, right? Because it's true, past years, they didn't win that many titles. But as you said, like if you think about when they had those 4 players, by the way, in 2021, they had already the core that they started to bring in. Remember, they were doing the 10-man roster. Then they got in Zeus. And then actually, if you remember that first year, people were like, actually, have they fucked up by gambling on all the rookies? Maybe they should have got some veterans in. Where are their great players from the LPL coming back? You know, people like Defton that were coming back to Korea. Like those years, you could have done a very easy one. I agree with you, though. If you set it up this way, if you say, when you win Worlds, right, first of all, every fan's going to tell us last year that means T1 at the end of the year was the best. They were better than JDG. They were better than Genji. Then if you say, and you had millions to spend because you were the world champions and T1, you had potentially, I believe this is true, by the way, you have, in my opinion, the biggest magnet ever to get any player you want. Like, I agree with that. That's something I did say all year long on Summoning Insight. Before T1 had won Worlds, I did say, I actually think this year is going to end up being a wasted year, because if you look at the rosters of the other super teams out there, bro, couldn't you have just had this team? Like, I'm pretty sure if T1 said to Viper, you know what, mate, come play with us. Like, I'm pretty sure he'd rock over. If they, look, mate, you know what, maybe not everyone says yes. Let's say Canyon says yes to Genji. Bro, I'm pretty sure Tarzan from Weibo would have said yes in an instant to come over and play in T1. So, in my opinion, to put your point in perspective, I actually do agree. I think if you'd made roster moves with those players, you could have won everything, bro. I think you're right. I actually think, logically, if you're the world champion and you've got potentially like the most ability to get in other great players, I think the goal shouldn't be win Worlds again. It should be win everything. It should be actually, like, by the way, wouldn't that be sick as well if you're Faker? Be the only person who ever did the Golden Road, the Grand Slam. That would be the ultimate goal to have if you're Faker, right? So if you want to do then separate after that, yes, of course, it's underwhelming. Like, spoiler, except for Worlds, they did nothing. They did EWC, which is outside the Riot circuit, and at all the real tournaments, like, look, I'll give them this. They could have won the spring split. They didn't. Yeah, they could have, but even then, they could have, right? Some of they couldn't have won. I mean, the joke is Genji didn't win that one. And then MSI, forget about it, bro. Like, that's probably the most fugazi of all of theirs. Because when Monty always goes, they've only ever come third. It's like, bro, that's probably the worst third I've ever seen from an Asian team. That's the one where they almost got clapped twice by G2, for fuck's sake. Like, that was a rough one. So anyway, I agree with it overall. But I can't say the one where it's like a complete, it can't be a failure for you win Worlds. And also, here's the other reason why, Keire. If they'd have won Worlds, but in the way that DRX won in 2022, then I'd say fair play. But I actually have to say, this is where idiot fans will never understand. I'm not a Faker hater. I'm a Faker connoisseur. I only want to see peak Faker. Or I want to appreciate him as a captain, but then not say he's the best player. Because, bro, the way that they actually won this one was fucking straight fire. Like, as he said, the two teams they beat. Like, remember, if either Genji or BLG wins this Worlds, and think of the years they're having, they'd be like top 5 all-time team guys. Like, and T1 beat both of them. And then if you're a Faker fan, it even literally like something out of a bad fucking shonen anime from fucking Japan. Faker, the actual champion, like, re-emerged on those games as well. Like, literally, like, every wet dream of a T1 stan of how he came in. Like, I even said it on Twitter, like, bro, he used a fucking ability called Hero's Entrance to enter a team fight. Like, literally, like, it's almost like it was designed to make it look like Faker's coming in Superman, like, and then he just saved the whole day. And it's like, the joke is, if me and Dom actually did hate T1, yeah, you're right, we'd all be malding and, like, fucking opening the window and preparing to jump out or whatever. But we are, like, here's what you will actually know, guys. I could do this is a hot take. That actually was what might be the best moment in the history of esports. I've seen all the moments in esports. That was actually straight fire. Like, I love when people do shit like that, like actual real carry play. So anyway, to summarize, as usual, I can agree with the spirit of Keire's take, but the letter of the law, that it was like what was the actual original take? That it was a complete listen, it can't ever be a complete failure to win Worlds. Come on,
bro. When you're DRX and you win one, right? That's fine.
As someone who was a fan of Forgiven, never even made an LEC final, LCS 0 LEC titles, Flame 0 Gen titles, Rookie got one World. Bro, I have to at least give some status to like titles. I can't be like, bro, they're all suck. It's pretty hard to win titles, Keire.
They're underachievers as individuals.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm talking about teams here. You know what I mean? I'm talking about teams. And here's the thing, right? Okay, here's like the ultimate like catch all of like, T1 is supposed to be the most like premier like organization, right? Okay, and the like hang on, I do not know why, right, okay? They must have, like, the most, like, not, like, underachieving, like, fans, but they get, like, a lot, like, the normies that come in just to watch Worlds and
of course,
watch
yeah,
the
of
rest of the year.
course.
It's like, I do not know how, like, they are consistently, like, just settle for less. Like, it just seems like all the time.
You mean the fans or the players?
Yeah, like, the fans or the players. It's like, where the...
Put it this way, I'll give you a mini spin. I got a mini hot take of mine I can spin from this, because this will make T1 fans mad. Here's how you actually know that I and you, we actually hold T1 to a way higher standard than their own fans. Because if you want to take your take and make it spicy, here's what you do with it. If you actually consider the last 3 years, the full time they had the full 5-man roster, you know these fans actually don't believe they were ever the best. Because, look, 2 Worlds is amazing. But if I say 2 Worlds, EWC, 1 LCK, and that's all for 3 years, that's actually underwhelming if you were the greatest team of all time. If you're actually the greatest team of all time, by the way, you'd have like a gang of LCKs as well. By the way, even for MSI, you'd at least made the MSL finals. You know what I mean? You'd fuck around, do that shit, do some JDG shit where you lose like 1 series. You can lose. It's just the problem is, like, the actual haul isn't as crazy as you'd think. Like, if you actually are the best team of all time, where are all the other championships? Like, look, the Worlds part you've nailed. But by the way, there's also other teams who've got Worlds. So that's the one I do find weird. I agree with you in a way, Keire. Like, what's weird is I actually would have thought, because think about how harsh Korean fans are. I would have thought, I mean, that's the other thing we're all forgetting about. We're all now going to pretend at the end it's like a happy ending and there was no problems the whole time in T1. Then the whole time they were ordering trucks and asking for everyone to be fired and saying, like, "Should kill yourselves" or something insane. Like, why are we just going to delete that from our minds? Is that like some 1984 shit like that? What? That never happened. They always loved T1 Thorin. Like, what? They didn't. They were hating him. The joke is, I was even the one like, well, maybe don't send trucks, guys. Calm down. It's just a game, you know.
And one more thing, and this is like just like an old head thing, okay? Because you'll know this as well. Remember in StarCraft when you're like your team would lose like Pro League, or your guy, your like A1 player would lose like the OSL or the MSL in like tragic fashion. The fans would be fucking furious, and then you'd be like, oh, he went to World Cyber Games and beat all the other people on behalf of like Korea, and the Koreans would be like, oh, we don't care about World Cyber Games, because at that time they only cared about the domestic Korean stuff. And this happened in StarCraft 2 with not OSL, the GSLs as well, where like GSLs were like the gold standard, right?
Yeah.
It's so weird in League where now we pretend that like LCK like isn't like LCK is unbelievable, like winning LCK is
by the way,
just, like,
you could easily do a take with that, because I actually agree that is a topic that is not being discussed. Probably the worst thing about the fact that this T1 team has won the 2 Worlds but only won 1 LCK is people are now doing this thing. You've probably seen it on Dom's Twitter, where they pretend like they say that line that sounds great on paper. They go, the thing about Faker is, because he's been around so long, he doesn't care about just random games. He just, they say he turns up and then the quote goes, when it matters. Now, the reason why, if you say that, you're going to make someone like Dom mad, is because you're actually implying like MSI and LCK don't matter. Like, look, they don't matter as much as Worlds, but they do matter. Like, I agree with you, Keire. Like, it's really fucking... I would actually say, look, at Worlds, now because of the LPL thing, it's probably the hardest to win because of the lack of familiarity. But, like, after Worlds, even if you think the LPL's better, on paper, LCK is probably actually the 3rd hardest tournament to win after Worlds, isn't it? Like, it's probably still harder than MSI. Like, you've got all those Korean teams. Like, as you saw, FearX and fucking KT can get you in LCK, mate. It's not a joke. So, it is a bit weird the way people act like that's like almost like... They act like that's like the LFL or something, bro. Like, it's fucking LCK. Like, LCK probably back in the day, as I said, my favourite players, Flames, it's probably harder to win LCK back in the day than Worlds.
Yeah, particularly the Korean fans. It was just such a... Watching the shift was just so strange.
It's true. Okay, Zaboutine, have you got a take?
Yeah, I do got a take. I don't know how spicy it's gonna be. I feel like I have a very hard time rating the spice of my hot takes overall. I'm gonna start with, I think the last time LPL, because we have had during these Worlds kind of a demonstration of incompetence from some supports around the globe. I don't think it's been a really good World for support outside of Keire, right?
Yeah, that's why he looked so insane, didn't he? He looked way better than everyone.
Yeah, he looked phenomenal. But the other ones were not really, really looking great, right?
By the way, they're actually the players people blaming most of the series. Lehens in the Gen G series, on in the BLG one, obviously. Yeah, of course.
So it's probably... I don't know how precise this take is, but I think the last time LPL had the best supports in the world, like China had the best support in the world, it was 8 years ago with Ming in 2018. At MSI, when he was with Uzi, I don't know how you call it, Uzi and Ming at RNG, I think it's like the very last time, because if you go 2019, even Worlds of like FPX didn't have the best support. Then you go, then Keire Beryl happens, then Keire happens. So I don't think there is a single time in the last 6 years that LPL or a Chinese player was the best support in the world.
Did you just co-sign Beryl as the best support, by the way, at one point in time?
Yeah, I think Beryl was the best support in the world at some point. Yeah.
Bold. Okay.
You done it again, Zaboutine, by the way, where you come in with a normal take,
I know,
complete normal take, and then you just drop like a nuclear furnace. And me and Thorin are just like, what?
Because what I love there, Keire, is he was making this take about like that, and then out of his pocket, we're like, oh, sorry, if I just dropped my Beryl was the best support in the whole world. Oh, my bad. Excuse me, I'll just put that back in my pocket. Like, that's the take right there, bro. Holy shit. We all think he's a meme who buys control wards, bro. Okay.
By the way, I've got one for you here, Zaboutine. No, because a little challenge in this, right? 2021 ADG did happen, and Mako Viper won a lane, and Mako was literally setting up the entirety of ADG with Flandre as like a Korean-like styled, like objective setup gold concentration team with like the ultimate backline of like slow scale with like Scout and Viper, and we have like seen every single archetypal team that Mako's went to, they instantly become like the Mako style, and at that tournament, like his team were griefing them like non-stop, putting them on like stuff that he's good at, but the team doesn't know how to like do it. But he was unbelievable at that tournament. So like I think you're being a little bit disgenerous. Like I can agree, maybe like you could say he was like 1A or second or third, but he was a candidate for the best support in the world in 2021. Like he was way better than anyone's giving him credit for.
With that said, though, his take was though that like it was more like that the LPL just hasn't had great. Essentially, they haven't had truly elite supports for you since Ming, basically. Is that the problem?
Since Ming and Mako. But Mako is even older, right? Mako was already there back in MSI 2015, right? It was like his premiere.
By the way, is there like a follow-on? Is there like a follow-on connecting thought? Like, for example, is this lack of a support something that's affecting why the LPL hasn't won Worlds? For example, is it like an edge Korea has because they have the better spots? Is that what you're thinking?
If you actually look into the detail, right? Like the LNG last year quarterfinal LNG versus T1 is a massive support gap. I think JGG versus T1 I think wasn't a massive support gap, but Keire was the better player in the support position. BLG versus T1, I think there's a massive support gap. Genji versus T1, there's a massive support gap. You can speak about the quarterfinal TES. There's a astronomical support gap between. So I'd say I say like I don't think that China has been able to produce the same level of support as they did for solo laners. I think for solo laners, they had Zoom 369. They have been right now for Midnight. They have Yagao. They have Knight. Even though they're still like resort to importing. And I think like for some reason the region is not able to produce top tier talent in terms of support. Like they have insane ADCs, right? Gala, like for instance, one of my favorite ADC in the world. They have all position set and then supports like middle of the pack, like I would say LEC level supports.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like the assumption, but here's the thing: a lot of people thought that like the LPL was going to be like a factory of like producing like great talent in like all positions all the time. But if you look historically, like at the LPL, that just isn't actually the case, because even before Ming and Mako, their supports were very strange players. Like OMG's support, which I'm not even going to go through all these different names, was one of the strangest guys to have ever played League of Legends. He would then go sometimes play jungle, like, and play Yorick and stuff like that. You know, like they have had, and then you had one traditional support player who was FCZF, I think that was his code, who basically, his ultimate superpower is he would just glue his arse cheeks to his ADC and do whatever they say, and he just was on with loads of great ADCs, like he was with Wei Zhao, then Name, then Imp at the very end, I think. But that's it. Like the whole idea is that he just kept on producing great support players like all the time. It's a complete like mythos, and that like Mako and Ming are like the people that proves the exception. And the thing is like Mako's even an exception like outside of that, because Mako's actually a generation, as you said beforehand. So yeah, I think the role that cripples the LPL and the one that they should have been like importing the most to get like Koreans in, or like trying to like build around in terms of, or at least implant the knowledge into new players, is support. Because if you look at the lose conditions for loads and loads and loads of LPL like teams, it usually is like the support.
By the way, I actually think this is... Yeah, go on. You got some more, go on.
No, sorry. I was just like, my take wasn't very hot, so I was like, I can double down on a hotter take. Because I have another one that's a little bit more hot.
Okay.
I was about to say that I think G2 was actually a top 5 team at Worlds 2024. And if you could replay the tournament randomly and have like, just the RNG happening again and again, I think it will converge towards 5th. Like,
we'll put a pin in that one. We'll come back to that in a second. That one's a little bit too far. I'll just say on the other one, I actually think it's a great point, actually. It's something I was thinking about myself in the sense that I actually think another factor that was mad underrated at Worlds, by the way, spoiler, it's all the tournaments that Keire has ever won, is, when people do that thing where they say, T1, the real problem with T1 is what they do is they make them sound like a StarCraft player back in the day, like, if you give them too much time on the patch, they'll like figure it out and then you just cooked at that point, like, it's not T1, it's just Keire's champion pool, isn't it, as far as I can tell? Like, I'm not even being sarcastic, like, look at all the rest of it, like, whether Faker's any good or not, actually isn't based on the patch. Like, spoiler, he wasn't spamming Orianna and fucking... I mean, there was no here, but he wasn't playing that anyway. Like, that was available. He was actually opting into, like, fucking hands matchups like Silas and shit. It's why, actually, by the way, if you're a Faker fan, the more interesting story was that weird one that implied either the day of the final or before that he'd, like, found some new posture and he wasn't having hand injury issues. That's probably way more telling, because to me, he looked like he himself knew he could play way more mechanically strongly than he has been the last year or so. Like, if you think in summer, his hands look scuffed as fuck then, mate. Like, I'm not surprised he was having all those problems where he looked like he was, like, in mental distress, or he was, like, banging his head off the wall. That was where he was like failing basic, like the joke everyone said was he made it look like he had the old fucking package on Corky. He was just going into the center team fights and dying. Like so everyone always looks at the other players. You look at Zeus, right? Zeus always has like insane counter pick potential to free up Faker's champion pool. Right, that's all well and good. You could take every other factor there. Gumayushi, he doesn't always play the strongest carries, but then he has like his own pocket picks at the kit. No, it's just Keire. And the reason why it's Keire is this, because there's only 2 games in the playoffs where T1 actually looked scoffed. It's when, here's what happened to Zaboutine. They fell into the classic coach's trap, which is one of our rules in T1 is you can't ever give us Caitlyn. Gumayushi is a god. The 2 times they took Caitlyn, bro, their team looked way worse because what did the Caitlyn have to come with? Keire Braum. And the second you took Keire out of the game and just made him basically like a generic support, they looked half as good as a team. So I actually agree with you. The reason why I agree with it is because I think as a Keire take, it's a brilliant one. I actually do think if you were to look over the last few years, what doesn't the LPL have, right? Not what does, because I agree with you, as everything else now. All the old stereotypes have been broken. If people remember back in the day, the reason why, by the way, spoiler, I basically think this almost counts like winning Worlds. If you're Knight, there's no longer that thing of like, but can a Chinese mid win? He basically did, for fuck's sake. It just didn't get the last game. He played about as well as anyone could who's never won Worlds. Like, so there's no problem with mids being Chinese. It's not the case you have to import anymore. I agree. Top lane, by the way, this years ago, that was a myth. There's no top lane. There's loads since then. There's good going. Obviously, all fucking modern day Bin, 369, bro. You can Zoom when he was good. You can run down a list of top laners. There's some really good top laners there that are Chinese. Every position, in fact, now has them, except I agree. If you go and look, even when you actually look, bro, they haven't even had many imports that were good at fucking support. It's barely anyone. Because if you look in history, when did actually China get to the top? It's either just off solo laners like IG and stuff like that. Ming was the few legit ones who could do it with his hands. I actually think this is probably why Mako's had the storied career he has, because he's the unicorn in that region. He's the only one that's even trying to play the brain, almost Korean style of LCK. By the way, if you took the nameplates off, you could more easily believe that fucking Mako was Korean himself. You could believe that's Core JJ or something, bro. I mean, maybe not the engage angle, but the way he plays the map. And I agree with you, Keire, every team takes his DNA and becomes that kind of a macro team, etc. Whereas the difference is, if you even think of who Ming is like the fucking ultimate Giga Chad Hillesang type fucking support, which, by the way, is what they seem to just produce in that region. Everyone tries to be, it's why I'm not surprised On was the best now. Everyone's whole shit is just I'm either the super aggro engage guy, or I'm the guy who just plays Ricard in every team fight, because spoiler, with the LPL, we're going to team fight all the time. So I sort of agree, because if I think of when they got to the top, the actual era I thought with the LPL truly could challenge every year was actually the era when they had a few. If you remember, the one that's probably the forgotten one is Lamau, if people remember when he used to play for JDG. When they had him on their team, they used to support counterpick almost every game. Yeah. Well, that's the problem is if you can't ever do that, and by the way, you wouldn't bother now. Like everyone just plays the obvious ones. Like I actually agree. I think it's a great take. That's the one region that's the one role that holds that region back. I actually think it's true. If you could change that one role, you could even take some of the other players off. Like that's what they don't have. The irony is you could even argue like this actually shows you how bad it's been. I mean, we at least did have like Mickey X and Hillersang in Europe, and then we had like Trimby come. We've even had some decent players in fucking Europe. So I actually agree. I think it's easily the worst position because if I look historically as well, how many times, by the way, has the best Chinese team had a bad support? Like Baolan and Yu Yanjia and Mark. And, bro, there's been some criminal ones at support especially. That's easily the role that can sort of coast. I almost feel like the saddest thing about that as well is, if you think about it, here's the reason why it's actually obvious that's the missing role. Because, bro, as you saw from BLG, the best Chinese teams are fucking unbelievable at team fighting. Well, I'll tell you what, the most misunderstood thing, I tell you, I used to play a lot of support myself. The most misunderstood role in team fights is always support because you're not the one doing the damage. But if you know support, you can see in fights where it's like, oh, fuck, like 2 spells, won this whole fight for that guy. Like, the way he got like the Mikhail's off on this guy in time. Or like, that is it's the hardest to see, but I agree, it's the easiest one in the background to like make you weaken. It's a good take. I think it's a good take. Right, go on then. Give me something else on this bullshit G2 one though. Like, why is G2 the 5th best? Who's the 4 before them? Give me the 4 before them. Why are they 5th? Come on, hit me with this. What's the reasoning? Come on.
I mean, I'm just looking at the actual draw of G2 was like absolutely.
Oh, and in the end they got the 2 finalists, didn't they? Yeah, it's true. Yes.
They start with Pain Gaming, so okay, there's only one team, right? They are the favorite against. Then they face Korea seed 1, which I think HAD was one of the best team at the tournament, even though they fell short to BLG, but I think they were very strong. I would rate them top 4.
Those are the 4 teams. So the 4 teams are T1, BLG, Hanwha, Genji, and then you're putting G2 5th, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. Okay.
Right, because then they beat Weibo, which is a semi-finalist. Then they actually lose 2-0 to T1, but T1 is the world champion in this tournament.
Yeah.
And then they have this very close series where I think they kind of they didn't play perfectly, obviously, right? They had these hoopsies in game 3, but it didn't look like a series where BLG was at ease against them. I think that one of the weaknesses of G2 was like Mickey X wasn't playing well, but On wasn't playing well either. So it was a pretty scrappy series. And then they got out of the tournament. But if you look at like the track record, right, losing 2-1 against the world finalists in a close series, losing to the world champion, beating the semi-finalist, and losing in a BO1 against the Korean seed 1.
By the way, that was even a close game as well. That was a good one, though. Hanwha Life one. That was a close one. That was the one where they were doing the comeback.
It was a close one. So if you were to like, you had the chance to take the same teams, right, and like just generate different world draws over time, I think that's eventually you'll get G2 to converge towards like the 5th position, like top 5. I think there are probably like occurrences when they can make it the top 4. They would probably like have a tied series in quarterfinals. But looking at the gameplay and looking how they play to BLG, I can't really wrap my head around any other team in the quarterfinalists that looked like amazing. Because I think that, for instance, LNG looked really, really poor in quarterfinals. And so even though they made it, I don't think that FlyQuest or LNG were significantly better than G2. And so the take should be, if we were in a normal podcast, I would say you look at like what G2 and the draw and the system, but it's much better to say that G2 was actually a top 5 team that got eliminated in Swiss stage because the format is really, really dog water. And yeah, that's it. So I think they are actually legitimately from the screen results, from how they played on stage, from their results against BLG, I'm pretty sure they could have made top 5, even top 4.
I like the way he just threw it again. He did it again. Why did he just throw the scrim results in at the end there? Like all the rest of it was like normal argument. He's like, if you put in scrim results, then they're basically like the best team in the world. So like, all right.
Because otherwise, Keire is not annoyed.
Oh, okay.
And it's not doesn't. Okay. I mean, I'm getting the.
Oh no, you are playing him like a fiddle. You are like the way you're doing it. It's like well, listen, I can tell it's like all an act, and you're just masterfully doing this. But like you're baiting him in every time. Like every time at the end, he's like ready to stop listening. Then you just throw some shit. Go then, hit me with it, Keire. What do you think of this take?
I'm actually just like shook to my actual bones. By the way, well. Why are they converged? Like, first of all, like they could actually statistically get like actually a harder draw than this. Would they call it? But they could also get like a bunch of like easier ones. But they actually still have to play an exit like BO3, and they've had like this team's like shown the ability to like fail easy given exit BO3s. For example, against NA, like. Because here, for example, I noticed you slid this in here, like Zaboutine, right? You snuck this one in here. You're like, oh, LNG and Weibo Gaming, you know, what they call? They look like dog shit in like the playoffs. It's like, yeah, but like, what about Fly? What about do G2 have like adapted to all those like Fly Quest drafts as like well as like Gen G did, and would they have been able to like overcome them and win all those lanes? It's like that would have been interesting to see. Like, I would have been an interesting match. I don't think that would have been free. Like, I think Fly Quest were dog shit, but the Fly Quest that played against Gen G was not anywhere near as bad. The other thing is like, for example, like we LNG, like, you know, we got more data on LNG, like, and so therefore you can't. But the problem is like you don't get free data for like games you didn't play. Like, for example, you could just mythos it and just be like, well, you know, G2 versus Weibo Gaming, Broken Blade would just be getting solo killed by Breathe all the time. How are they supposed to play? Like, that's like my issue. When you put it like when they converge towards fifth, I do agree they are in that ballpark. Like, they are in like the area of like fifth, sixth, like in that like area, like stuff. For example, and we were unlucky to grab like BLG and T1. But here's the other part as well. They also still grabbed BLG when BLG looked fucking dog water still as well. Like, BLG were still not good even in like when they were exiting like groups, and like they still had like massive problems. Like Elcon Ezreal still hurts my brain to like this day, and they got like a freebie. Like, no, Ezreal should never be able to die that game. Like, it should be almost impossible. And they were like, and in some ways they were masters of like their own fate. And also they drafted double Orianna Nocturne into T1. And just threw that entire like BO3 on that like draft pick as well. So I have very little sympathy for them in those like generalities. But I do agree. If you run the tournament lots and lots, they would go closer to like fifth. But they would lose to a lot of people.
Isn't it outrageous though that like they end up in the same situation as like Mad Lions, who are like absolutely terrible.
I mean, the where they placed doesn't like show how good the teams were.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? It's like, I mean, you can probably make the same argument for TL, but I think TL played way worse. But when when I was looking at like all the hot takes you can make, I was like, so I'm gonna try to think about like some Western approach, right, or some Western hot take. And when I look at like the Western teams and their overall performance, I'm like, okay, so Fly is probably our biggest satisfaction of the tournament if we're Westerner and we're open-minded, supporting both NA and EU. But I think the most egregious point is like that this G2 team was not playing bad. I think this G2 roster was actually able to produce more. We saw it at MSI. And I was so upset by the format to see Mad Lions, Fnatic, that had no ambition whatsoever to play well, and G2 for the same round of the tournament and have no chance to prove themselves. And at the same time, you see like LNG kind of like slipping through the cracks and then looking like absolutely terrible in quarterfinals. I feel like the outcome of Worlds as a whole, maybe it's a hot take, is random. Like, do you think like legitimately, like if you redraw everything, like T1 wins? Like T1 wins against BLG. I feel like there is so many. Like the outcome of Worlds is random.
Here's the problem. I know what he means, Keire. As in, like, one thing I do always wonder about in League especially is I feel like compared to any other esports game I'm aware of, it's the only one where I actually think every variable, almost like the butterfly effect, changing one variable changes every variable. And the reason I say that is, you know, I'll give you the best example because a lot of people by now will know this narrative. There's a detail everyone always forgets about last year's T1 win, which is the joke is when you go back and look how T1 played and when they changed their draft, it's actually Gen G did them the favour by beating them in like that 1-0 game or whatever, because after that game they were like, fuck playing this meta, like this doesn't work for us, we'll go to our shit. And then so the joke is if they actually didn't play Gen G except like in the finals, maybe they would never have been that good. So similarly, I actually sort of know what you mean by that. Like there's a world where like it's already the case that people usually agree all Worlds does, because it's single element Swiss with bad seeding, is tell you who the best team was, but it definitely doesn't help you with the rankings. Like I agree with you go down the list, like for all we know maybe Gen G was the second best team, but the problem is because they're on the same side as T1, you play them. By the way, the harshest ones are some of the other ones like Hanwha Life. Like Hanwha Life, maybe they were the third best team here, but we'll never know. They went on the round of 8 and it makes them look shit now, doesn't it? So I sort of know what you mean by that.
Yeah, the really famous ones actually. In 2017, Samsung Galaxy probably doesn't win the tournament if they're not in the group with RNG because they literally learn how to play the game by being in a group with RNG because RNG absolutely fucking annihilates them and they proceed to then copy them for the rest of the tournament. By the way, that's like another thing about like what do you call it with like Worlds, just to like talk about team rankings because we spoke about this. I actually think that HLE lineup is mega underrated, by the way, at this tournament. As in, if they had matched up into Gen.G and T1, also this tournament could look very, very different. Like they could have beaten all the Korean teams if they had played each other could have like beaten each other. I think potentially like Gen.G T1 could have went loads of different ways if Lens doesn't lose his mind, but. BLG was just the kill team for that like HLE. HLE just cannot beat that BLG team because Thorin Ben is just it's like the year that Chovy went with the 1 year he went with Griffin. Like Griffin were actually a threat at that year of Worlds. They just couldn't play against IG. The minute the Sword had to play against the Shy, it's just like pack up your books, everyone get back in the school bus, we're going back to Korea. Like it's just unplayable. But so yeah, like that is another like really good point. The variance in like Worlds now, particularly with Swiss, like Swiss is just basically you had the world's worst format. Now we're at the second ones, and the variance on like what can happen and who can be like eliminated is absolutely crazy. It also makes like the sides of the brackets like really really heavy in terms of like stacking the teams on top of each other. It gets really really strange because even if you don't always like exit or get out at like the same time or like where you truly should be. So you have like LNG leaving as like a 3-0 team, but then they're not actually like that good relative to like the bracket, and therefore like it kind of makes it really strange. So yeah, I agree.
By the way, on the G2 one, the only problem you had with the setup of that one is it was actually tricky initially to tell Zaboutine if you were making which one of these 2 points. Were you making a point about the format, like as I just said there? An obvious example would be the reason why Animal Life could be the third best team is because for all we know they only lost to BLG, lost to T1. Maybe they would have been in the semis, but I couldn't tell. Were you trying to make that point? Because essentially that point is almost like we're as good as FlyQuest. Like spoiler, FlyQuest was almost in the semis. Or were you making the point that actually from the eye test they were the 5th best team? Because if it's the latter, you are absolutely wilding. There's no universe where if you looked at the eye tests, you were like, yeah, actually G2 probably were the 5th best team at this tournament. No, I agree with you. If you look at who they played, first of all, they did end up having one of the hardest draws again. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's not even that. I guess the problem with the draw one is this. T1 is technically the 4th Korean seed, so we can't wait till they win the tournament and go, what the hell? I'm playing the World Championship. Because at the time, actually, 4th Korean seeds, it won the better draws you can have. But the BLG one sucks, obviously, because they were the number 1 seed from LPL. They won everything in LPL, so I'll give you that one. Also, by the way, even drawing Animal Life's a tough draw. They were number 1 LCK seed. They did have a very, very tough draw. So, like, I do think this is one of the harder draws they could have had. And they even then, I agree with you on the BLG. They weren't even that far from getting out still. They almost even as scuffed as they were, like, tripped up and got out of this group and definitely could have drawn an easier path. I don't think they actually were the 5th best, but I agree with the general point about the format. Like, I actually do think one of the other factors I like about Double a Limb is I always say to people, if you have a low bracket, it's not like that can avoid all seeding issues as well. But because you like flip the bracket, if people don't know, every 2 rounds you flip what side of the bracket you drop down to make more matchups. It does. I always say, to me, the low bracket can sort of work as like an error correcting. Like if you think something was really unfair in the upper bracket, and then you see different opponents, that usually does tell you like either they were that good or that bad or it's fair. And then I also think the good thing about the low bracket is it literally places you. You go 2nd, 3rd, 4th, you do that, etc. Except obviously you get the 2 spots for like 5th to 6th, 7th to 8th and all that jazz. So I sort of agree overall with the old point. Here's a good one for you. This is a straight fire take. So I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to lead with my hottest take. And it's mainly a hot take because of who I am. So what's great about this one, Zaboutine, is this is where a lot of people are wrong about me because they always think I try to troll people, right? That's actually not even true. I once heard this saying. I once apparently said it was wrong and said it was a famous saying. It isn't. It's just some shit from the internet, apparently. But there was like a saying in like the Russian-speaking community, which is like, this is how people would, this is actually how you can describe my personality. You know, they think I'm trolling. They think I'm trying to be like, I show speed or something. And I'm like crafting, like, what's the way I could trigger everyone today and get all the attention? Which isn't what I do. It's actually just accidental. I'm just like, it's just like a secret, like, it's like my fucking passive ability in Magic the Gathering or something. Like, my aura effect is just to trigger people. So like, the saying in the Russian community goes like something like, didn't mean to offend you, just got lucky, which is kind of like what my whole and analytical / stylish, right? So what's funny is people are going to think that I come up with this take just to trigger them. But as usual, it wasn't all about them. But this is a real take of mine. My take is this. You know the moment when T1 won the 5th game and Faker came in on Galio and they won that insane team fight and then they won Worlds off it and Faker won his 5th Worlds and everyone was crying and, oh, this one is for you, the fans, this Summoners Cup and all that. You're all going to think I'm going to hate on that. It's the opposite. I'm not actually joking. In context, if you understand the whole context of Faker's career and this tournament and the fact that we're in 2024 and the way that he actually won that team fight at the end, that actually is for real, a real contender for the best moment in the entire history of esports. I'm not even joking on any level. Like, that is literally something out of a fucking anime / movie. Like, if you think about like the like one of my favorite films, I'm sure everyone likes it, the first Matrix film. When you watch it, right, one of the reasons it's so good is because like all the story beats it hits are perfect, aren't they? Like the way, like, oh, is he not really the one? Oh, but he is, because he had to just believe in himself in a different. So maybe he wasn't the one before, but then he became the one. You know, like all those fights at the end where he's not winning, but he's just hanging on and keeping it. It's so satisfying that when he wins at the end, you're like, well, it's brilliant, but that's movies. You know, real life could never be like that. I always say the best sports and esports moments are better than you could ever script them. Like, bro, I said this on Twitter. Faker literally used an ability called Hero's Entrance. Came in. He was not even in the fight. He comes into the fight. Like, this is like some fucking shit anime thing again where like you can fly across the screen or something. He comes in like Superman. Unironically, 1vx like the whole fight. By the way, 11 years into his career, when all the other great players in history, you know, the ones we have to put against Faker, like Flash from StarCraft, you got like fucking Simple from CS, you got fucking, like, here's the difference. I always say to Monty, if you actually know all the games, technically the actual most impressive body of work, believe it or not, is actually Simple. Because here's the difference. Simple had like 6 or 7 years he was at the top, but he was like a bona fide like top 3 player all those 6 or 7 years. But you can always make the argument, you don't have Koreans and Chinese in the same way in that game. You know, I mean, sure, I'm sure Caps would love to play in a game with just Europeans and North Americans. He'd be the GOAT right now. Maybe it'd be like Simple. But even so, it's not like Simple's coming in like 8 years later and winning the championship with the carry on the game. Like, that's the craziest part. Faker isn't the best player now, but at the end of that game 5, you could take the nameplate off and that was the best player. That was like in fact, I'll even say this. You think of all the great players and sports stars in history. I always say Michael Jordan ruined sports because he also did this sort of shit. He did the shit out of the movie where he really does come in and hit like the last second shot. You know, in basketball, people very rarely hit game winners, even the best players ever. You hit like 5 in your whole career. This guy would do it at like the big moment to win the championship. Like, this actually was for real, like probably the best moment ever in League of Legends esports. Like, the actual real GOAT player came in, did the most clutch player possible, and if he didn't, this is the best part, I hope people understand, if he didn't do those plays in game 4 and game 5, it's not even one of those ones that, you know, he helped them with. They just lose the game right out. They lose the World Championship. They either lose in 4 games or 5. And it would also be, by the way, the biggest bomber ending of all time for that lineup. Like, you just heartbreak, game 5. You're all the way that you've said all that shit for the fact. I actually think, unironically, there's no cynicism at all in this take. It actually is for real. Like, if it's not the best ever, because look, I guess the problem it has to be the best ever is, like I say, you have to know the context of who Faker is and the game and the fact that the game's evolved so much. And by the way, you have to know how good BLG is and the fact that they're not supposed to, and the fact that all their players are playing sick from the solo carries and they're all fed and everything. If you know all that, like, I will say, the best moment ever is probably one of those ones you can just see intuitively on the screen, like a fucking Simple 1v2 or the old fake ZVZ. But if you know the context of esports, this is like for real, like top 3 moment ever in the history of esports. I'm not even joking. I'm not even trolling.
I think to add on top of that, I would say it's probably, I think the last 2 games were the individual peak of Faker. I think the semi-final, mechanically, the semi-final versus Chovy, like the laning he has with Si-Hassen, the way he, like the damage testing, like you gotta understand, guys, right? Like, no one limit test versus Chovy. Right? I think that's the thing, is like, this guy is known worldwide to know better than you do in terms of like calculating damage in laning. Yes. So usually knows who wins the all-in. So if he's moving and posturing forward to you, he's not bluffing. Like, he's not the type of player that's gonna walk up like Showmaker or Knight and pretend he has the all-in to try to like dissuade you from going forward. He knows he wins. So the only way you win this type of moving forward walk up from Chovy is you gotta dodge the spell, which is pretty hard. Like, let's be real. You guys watch it. playing it's a different, right? It's a different story. When you see Faker like 15-20% HP with Sylas, semi-final played that way against, and the cameraman is not even looking at it, right? Because
true,
I mean,
true.
LoL esports doesn't care about laning, but we do.
Sure.
And trades versus Chovy. So on his field, right, the laning phase is Chovy's garden. Like nobody really challenges him on this part of the game. And then you see him pop off in semi-final, play very well. But then you see the series of like the final series and the game 4 and the game 5. I would say because the modern game is way harder to play. Like if you take today's Faker and you put him back in 2015, it's even worse than what it was. I think that it is his individual peak mechanically, like the way it's playing. I think the way he played at these tournaments, it's because it's like.
I mean, you only mean in these specific games, though, right? In these like big ones at the end of the series, yeah.
That's like because what's being good at League of Legends is it's understanding the situation, right? It's understanding the damage and being able to like not die and do as much damage as you can, and it's being precise with your ability, right? That's kind of like the core of being good at League of Legends. I think that if you take these 3 components and you look at Faker's performance, especially in the final, I think it is very hard to come back in time and don't see the opponents griefing, because maybe he was better in Solo King, Nagne and Rookie when he was like a coming up player back in 2014. But if you look at the level of training and the players he's facing in this tournament, Knight and Chovy, which to me are the 2 best mid laners ever, I think that you can definitely advocate that it's Faker's peak. This tournament and these last 2 series were.
But Knight absolutely butchers them. Knight butchers them in every lane. Like,
no, but he just means overall for the big games. He doesn't mean the whole tournament. He just means in like game 4 and game 5, for example, against Knight.
Yeah, like I can see that, but like for example, like game 4, I'll say that game 5's unbelievable, by the way. Like game 5's crazy. It's like insane draft gap because BLG just go pure comfort. That's the other thing, right? Narratively, BLG going for Are and Jax. They have to overcome like Ben's Jax and like you have to overcome Knight's Are and stuff like that. Narratively, it's really, really, really sick. But in game 5, like T1's draft is absolutely like bonkers. Like it's really, really hard for BLG to play the game because you have Xenol, Gragas, and Galio, and then Xayah all on disengage, and BLG's team must go forward. They cannot play like a ranged advantage fight. It's really, 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 really hard. But game 5 is unbelievably sick from Faker because he's constantly having to like move and match Knight's like roams, and without actually knowing where Knight is. Like he's actually making like reads, like gamble reads on like, oh, Knight's walked into vision and came off the wave. Do I farm that wave? And then like, you know what I mean? Like he's having to read Knight, and he hasn't got perfect information. The one thing that's like, game 4 is obviously like a huge game, but like if you watch like the comeback play for like how he gets onto like the backline and kills it, the actual like error, like the comedy of errors that have to happen on BLG for it to happen are like disgusting. Like On literally doesn't turn on ult, doesn't use summoner spells, Jun misses a melee range Sejuani, doesn't bump, and like it's genuinely like terrible. It looks like, you know what I mean, it looks sick, and when you're there at the time you're like, oh my god. But like game 5, in terms of like how good Faker is compared to game 4, like in terms of execution, is like nuts. But I don't think this was like peak Faker in terms of like his like skill sets and stuff like that. I would say like there were still like shortcomings. Like he does get to play Yone in this game, and you give basically any of the Yone players this tournament, and it's just like 3 wins left, right, and center, and he just gets consumed like alive and hammered.
Put it this way, though. Let me put it this way, though, Keire.
Yeah?
The notion that this is a player in, like, their fucking 11th year of being a pro is insane, though, isn't it? Like that's what I was trying to say. That's what I was trying to make the point of earlier about, like, with the simple point I was making is, like, take any other, like, GOAT contender in esports. They're not doing it 11 years later. Like, you know. I don't follow the fighting games, so fair enough.
Yeah, I agree with your thing. In terms of it being like an actual moment, like game 5, the Galio, the catch on tonight into the save, that is like literally pinnacle.
Put it this way, here's why it's so insane a moment. Because if I was to pause the game before game 5, and a fan came to me and said, Thorin, you're the esports historian, like give me like the context, what should I expect from this game now? I would have to tell them all the things that actually, like, it's not that they didn't happen, but I would have to tell them things like, look, the Faker guy on paper is the greatest ever, but the Knight guy, actually it's his time time to win, if anything, and if he's been much better than Faker the last few years. So don't expect like Faker to like be the carry of this game. Secondly, that thing about Faker being the carry, that was years ago, bro. Like even in the modern day, the way he carries is like, you know, he makes like a smart play, or he calls like his team in for the certain fight. He doesn't do the mechanical shit where you're like, that's the thing. Like all of that was wrong. Like in that one moment, he really did do. Like if people know this analogy, if anyone knows basketball, if you ever saw the last game Kobe Bryant ever played, it was reminiscent of this. Because what happened in this game was, it was the ultimate example I've ever seen of how like great competitors, it really is a mental thing. Because by the way, at this point in Kobe Bryant's career, he'd already had like multiple injuries, including that famous Achilles injury. So he was nowhere close to the old player that used to be like the best in the NBA, by the way. He wasn't even actually very good in his last season. In fact, most of his last season, all his numbers is shit. He's just bombing the ball because his team was bad anyway and they weren't going to make the playoffs. So it's like at that point in time, like everyone, it really was like a farewell tour. But if you've ever seen this last game he ever played, he starts the game and for 3/4 of the game, he's absolute shit. He's missing everything. And then at the end of the game, unironically, he just makes like the last 7 baskets in a row and wins the game. And the way he did it was like this. It was like it's like almost like, even though this, I know this isn't possible, it's almost like he was able to pause, like you could imagine Faker would, and go, this is my last game ever. Somehow I've got to actually just focus, and it's like whatever I've got left in like the tank, I've got to just get it all out now. But the problem with that is, it's easy in a movie to say that. In real life, you can't do things like that. Like there are so few people ever could really like lock in, as the kids say, like that, and just do like their 10 out of 10 play. Whereas that is what it looked like he did. Like at the end of that game, like, put it this way, the real sad one that people don't talk about in this final is, bro, if you are people on BLG, you are going to, for real, just wake up in the night having nightmares about this game. Like, you're going to wake up so many times. Oh, we could have done this. Like, even that one with the fucking night gets interrupted on the TP is like, that's like nightmare fuel shit if you carry the game.
But here's the thing. I was only saying that in contention. Everyone actually always gets, and this was it took Rich a while to figure this out, even though I would like say it to him a lot. It's like, when people talk about like the flash in the pan like moments, like the peaks that like Faker has, like in 2023 spring, Faker was like oddly insanely good. Remember, he was playing like,
that was when he was playing the Ari and shit. Yeah,
right, okay. I always say to people, it's like, oh, he's back. And I was like, I actually say he's not back, because it actually undermines, because I watched all the games, what peak Faker actually was. Like, right, I remember 2017 spring, when it was the KT super team, and he would pick Katarina. He had never played it fucking ever before, and he smashed Smeb, Deft, Pawn, Score into the ground, as in, like, Mata is on stage, like, looking down the ranks, like, what the fuck is going on right now? How are we losing this game? And Faker's like like chuckling, like laughing on stage as though like he's
like some anime villain.
Like, mate, because that's what I'm saying. Like, it was so
I like the idea he's even doing like the real anime laugh. We're like, what, Nani? What? How are you doing this? He's like,
and next thing you know, like KT are having serious conversations about banning Katarina and like BO3s against like what is that? Because that's what I'm saying. That's true. That's what like peak Faker was. It was like game 5 counter pick. Give me like the pick every single game. And
we'll say if someone's a newer fan, old Faker was so insane. There are times he like pioneered a champion. We never saw him playing competitive, because in the week he played it in solo queue, everyone was like, holy shit, he's way too good. It just got black. And the joke is, it got banned and other people got to play it, and else you get not Faker. Like, he did that with like Master Yi and shit. People were like, it's true. You know, it's actually true.
Remember, it was like random. He randomly figured out like the Vel'Koz matchup, right? Yes. And then every team had to permaban against him. Yeah. And the only people we got to see play Vel'Koz were other folk not named Faker. Yes. So like, there's just that. I mean it in that sense of like, it does genuinely undermine what old Faker was. This is, I've watched a lot of the big, like, esports wonders, and the thing that really helps this one is it's a crescendo, because, you know, they've not beat BLG in the BO5, they played against them all the time, they have to overcome all the narratives, they're 2-1 down, it's games 4 and 5 that Faker's, like, big in, right? That's where it's super sick, and, like, I was there live, like, at the time, like, it was, like, unbelievably, like, cool, but, what do you call it, I was just countering to, like, what Zaboutine is, because, like, what do you call it? That is, and it was it was like mega sick. Like the Galio game is genuinely just like, and that was the other thing, Thorin. It's like redemption for the Galio 2017, and where he plays against RNG to take the team to the finals, and then Faker's actually quite bad in the finals, and this time he gets to play the Galio to win Worlds. Like, it's the redemption for the one he lost. Just got to get that one back in the bag.
Right, what's the next take? Go on.
I like the take of being the best esport moment of all time. I think it's very legitimate. Like, it's a really good candidate. I have a small one. I'd say that 2024 was the worst year for jungles in terms of skill expression ever. I don't think there is a single year where playing. I think the hardest champ you have to play to be a jungle in 2024 is like Brand, like champion.
That was pretty hard to play.
Yeah, I mean Brand is pretty hard to play, right? He's got designed in like 1964, something like this. It was like three spells. It's been played in support by unskilled player on the ladder for the last 15 years because the champion has no kits whatsoever. It's just like he was overtuned. But if you look like Zyra and Brand were like the hardest champ to play. There has been a year where if you put aside a few Milky Way Kindred games and like some Kindred counter pick into tanks, I would say 95% of the champion pool this year has been Vi, Press R champ, Maokai, Sejuani, reworked Karna. We have had a little bit of Lilia, which in the hands of pro players is not that hard to play. I think in terms of competition, I've rarely seen such a small skill expression of jungles, which have been pretty much the whole year literal dogs and walking to lane and pressing R in team fights, and that's about it. Where we had almost no Lee Sin meta, no Elise,
not very much Viego, very little Viego this year.
Every year suddenly Riot buffs random jungle. It can be like Zed, Talon, I don't know, Garen, something. This year has been extremely narrow in terms of champion pool, and I feel like it is very sad because I feel like, for instance, LPL usually have really insane jungles that you get to see at Worlds. And I think that's the meta started at the Worlds with new champions, and immediately people reverted to, no, let's go back on the Maokai and the Sejuanis and the Skarner because it's all we need from jungles. And I think it is a tragedy that the best jungles this year have been Maokai and Ivern.
Zaboutine, what do you think was like a good what was a good jungle meta? Like when was like a good jungle meta?
I think when you have Lee Sin, Jarvan, you have Poppy.
But I don't think Jarvan's more skillful than I think I agree Lee Sin is. Lee Sin is peak Kino, and when Lee Sin isn't in the meta of competitive league, Riot should do everything in their powers for Lee Sin to be in the meta. On principle alone, the champion should actually be over buffed because it is just so iconic to league, and the play reel that it produces from pro players is just free advertisement. It literally just sells the game, right? So I agree with that, but then outside of that, this year you had, for example,
Gragas.
We had
Gragas is a great jungle, has been removed, right? And you look at why is Gragas not there? It's an AP jungle that should combine perfectly well with champions such as Yone or even Tristana. Has a lot of really good matchups into dash champions such as Xinjiao and stuff like this. Hasn't been picked because it's just overall weaker, and you can have Sejuani that just walks up to the lane, spashes the E button, or Maokai just presses R in teamfight, close their eyes, and everything goes fine. So I don't know. I feel if you're a jungle in 2023, 24 is the worst year of your life. You're pressing Vi and you're waiting for someone to do something.
But for example, Razork's Vi is pretty sick. The things that Razork can do on Vi are pretty nuts. Where he powers up the Q, flashes onto Morgana, ult someone else, so that Morgana can't black shield them to get them. That is pretty.
This is a take about all junglers though. It's take about all junglers.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. No. What do you call it?
Shen should never be a finalist, right? Of in terms of skill, right? Shen has been on the bench watching the whole thing, bringing Gatorade tonight and Ben, and then goes at Worlds and is like, oh, Shen, we really love you, man. You gotta press this on Maokai and get saplings into bushes because On cannot contest vision properly. Or can you go on mid and just watch Knight do something with Silas and just press E with a Sejuani and press R randomly in team fight? I feel like I've seen years where junglers will win games out of a sick mechanical play or a good read in the jungle. This year has been farm to 6, press R with Nocturne. Nocturne, Maokai, Sejuani, Vi, Ivern has been 80% of the jungle pool. This is the worst year in history to be a jungle.
Here's the thing, I sort of agree with him, Keire. The reason why is, you can go the same route. Let's go champion-wise.
Okay.
Right? If you think about skill expression from jungle, first of all, obviously Lee Sin is, you can start in there. That is the champion for jungle. We all know all the best, gank junglers of all time. Lee Sin is their shit. The joke is, they even play that out of seat. In fact, I agree. This is actually why I sort of low-key agree. The real spoiler is this. When Lee Sin can't be played in the meta, there's probably something wrong with the meta, in my opinion, because that's a champion, back, I know it's a bad take, except we're old school, so we get it. Back in the day, even when Thresh wasn't a strong meta pick, you could still pick it, though, because of the kit. Like, the kit itself can win you a game, can't it? It's fucking sick. So, to me, if Lee Sin can't be played, that almost infers this wasn't a great year for jungle. Because beyond Lee Sin, you're thinking of champions. Like I said it before, the most underrated one easily is Viego. Because the worst thing about Viego, it's like, this is the analogy. For jungle, it has the same problem that Aphelios had for ADC. Because it was launched broken as fuck, every noob fan who doesn't play the champion goes, 200 years, lol, you just like press a button and it wins. It's like, bro, modern day Aphelios is really hard to play, mate. It's like, it requires incredible like information understanding. You have to know what your team's doing. You have to be able to communicate with them. Similarly, right, Viego, bro, if you love skill, everyone thinks, Viego was just up. It's probably the best jungle champion. Like, I've always said, the reason why I loved when people like fucking Inspired were on that is because if people don't know a little secret about someone like Inspired is, he's not one of those people who plays jungle because he has no hands. He actually likes the role. Like, he can off-roll a bunch of other roles. And the reason I've always thought Viego's genius is, it's like think about, right, we already give all this credit to the Silas players because it's like they're using other people's ults. Bro, the Viego guy's using other roles, fucking champions. That's even sicker. When you actually, there are some LPL players I've seen in jungle play Viego where I'm not even joking. I was like in a team fight. I've paused it and like ran it back and gone, bro, he essentially played like 3 champions that aren't even jungle champions in this fight. And he sometimes did it better than the other guy on the other team and did like the ult into an ability, into an escape. Like, some of those plays you can do with Viego are like mind blowing. It's just the problem is everyone remembers that shit Inspired one against Mad Lions where he got Misfits, where he got that like free ace and won them that game for no reason. And that was ages ago. That was when it came out as broken. Then if you think, here's the other reason why I sort of agree. Because one of the only champions left that's mega for skill expression is Nidalee, and about 4 human beings on this planet can actually play that champion. Anyone else who locks it in, unless you're Canyon and about 3 other LPL players, I'm very depressed if you lock that in. Like, that's why I even said when he locked it in, that was gangster. I actually thought, fuck, this guy is the shit. Maybe he is the jungle goat. He just chooses that. He chooses fucking Nidalee in elimination games as his comfort champion. Like, this guy just is like Lisanne Al-Gaib, isn't he? You're supposed to choose the fucking Sejuani there. It's not your fault when you lose. This guy didn't give a fuck. So I sort of agree. Like, if I think back on this year as well, Keire, even when I think of like junglers, bro, what jungler had a sick 2024? Like, basically no one. Like, the closest on paper was Canyon, right? Because he was
Canyon.
Yeah. After that, what Owner had like EWC finals, he was pretty good in. What else aside from that? He had a pretty up and down year, mate. As we said about Jun, bro, Jun almost won Worlds and he was fucking benched for half the year. Like, you actually go down the list, it's not good for jungle, mate. Like, hey, I actually think there's almost no region I can think of where the junglers are shining. Like, aren't they all kind of the players that are like either supposed to be like worse in form or we're all just blaming them? Who? Peanut? Oh, Peanut was very good.
Peanut was good because the jungle pool was definitely
more for him. Yeah, of course.
Like, you look in Poppy, right? You have your Poppy flex in red side and everybody's happy. In Genji, it's like, no, we have a triple threat. I just generally don't, like, I was looking at the stats, right? On Summer Splits, if I just combine Sejuani and Maokai, this is 2,000 games. And they combine almost 2,000 bans as well. So it's like
even why, Zaboutine.
2,000 bans.
It's even why, for me, I'm not that surprised that literally Tarzan, who didn't play the entire first part of the year, was able to just walk into a team and be a top jungler. Because his whole style was always brain jungler style. So, like, you're right, if no one's playing like fucking Super Hands champions, he's better than most of those people at that. Like, the LPL actually was a little bit weak on junglers this year, mate. I'm with you.
The only thing that I was just to verbalise what I was trying to say, okay? Specifically, I do agree on principle, Lee Sin, we agree, handshake on that. The only thing that I liked about this year is it was actually quite like skill set testing. As in, like, you had to be able to play like carries, like ranged pseudo carries, tanks, and you had to be able to play like some sort of like melee like bruisers. Like, they were all at some point throughout the year all in like the meta.
And Ivern.
Some people just didn't play Ivern, period. But like, I do agree on that. And you got to actually see like all like the inflex points of like what people were like weak at. Like, we got to see a development of Canyon's like tank play of like over the years, of like seeing him like play more and more like the Skarner and Sejuani and stuff like that. And I actually think he like got like better at it and stuff like that. That was the only thing I liked about it. I do agree with Zaboutine. The problem is when they came to the AP jungle era, where it was like the brand Zyra, like even the jungle items and the build path.
Also, Zyra jungle is just ass for the game. Yeah, it just looks fucking bad, bro. It's just bad. Yeah. It's bad.
Because those champions, even when played low skill, would like max out like so much like damage just by like being bad. Like, you could flash into the mid lane teams and like fucking bomb yourself as like brand, and then you'll be like, oh my god, he killed like 2 carries, but like there's nothing actual. It's not like a Lee Sin kick and all that. That was the only thing that I liked about the jungle pool this year, and I actually think it wasn't explored very well. That was the other one. I think that like people didn't really push the limits as much on what they could have played, and they did get really like stuck into the. Because you know what I mean, we've seen Ivern and how people could abuse it. It wasn't like
oh mate, you can even say it. Like, look, you can see it at Worlds, but I agree for the whole year. The whole year has been one of the worst examples ever of like these are the 4 jungle champions.
Yes,
just like that over and over again, wasn't it? Like,
yeah, 100%.
Okay, have you got to take Keire?
Right, this one's actually sad for me if you know like my perspective, and I'm not even trying to just be like some like doomer because like this is and Europeans will understand this, okay? And I think this is what's happening. The LPL is actually getting worse and worse and worse versus like the context of like China. Like the region is actually getting like worse, not better. And what's staving it off is like JDG and BLG, which are like the exceptions that prove the rule, and they're basically the G2 of this region a little bit right now, because they're like G2 is doing really really well. Like sorry, BLG is doing really really well versus the field and showing like good matchups into like against like the LCK, but the other teams throughout the year are like proven to be like highly problematic, particularly the middling like teams of like the LPL. Like I actually think like Weibo Gaming and LNG like at Worlds weren't particularly good, and they didn't look like not so much like dark horses, but like they like weren't going to like do anything against like HLE, like T1. Like you can go check on my show. I actually predicted T1 to win the finals. I actually didn't even think it was going to be. I was surprised on how close it was. I thought like T1, Gen.G, and HLE were by far the best teams. I think BLG were fourth by like a considerable margin. And I'm actually and obviously if you see all like the doomer news that I don't like put much stock into about how the LPL works and all that, it's just kind of like another year of like, is the LPL going to get like the right concentration of like talents to like rival what the LCK is able to produce? Because like the LCK, even when it's like you have like the flawed like gem teams, their floor is so high where like the flawed gem teams in the LPL are like all over the place, like OMG, Weibo Gaming, what do you call it? Anyone's Legend, like midway through it. So like it's a really strange thing. I just don't see like what the next like rising like squad or team or like core is. It's kind of just like you hope to God that you can get Knight plus a bunch of other people on like a good team, and that team's good, right? Because it's always good. And then you've got the other parts have got to try and get it together. Like it's a testament to the strength of the internals of the region. But JDG talent hogged like 3 players this year that were like unbelievable, right? But that was it. Like, what is like BLG going to like do or like improve? They've parted with his ruler now. We don't even know if like Canavi's going to continue. So I just don't see what the next like squad or combination of talent is going to be, because the LCK could look lots of different ways and still be really, really, really
So
sick.
basically, you don't think like in 2025 there will be the equivalent of a BLG or last year's JD? There won't be like a true super team type mega squad for you?
I think there might be like one, but like last year the LPL sent 3 really good teams. BLG, LNG, and JDG were all really, really good last Worlds. Like I don't care about like the end result. All 3 of those teams were really, really good.
Yeah.
They were all super legit. This year, they sent, in my opinion, 1 super legit team. Like, at 2 Worlds, at the point of, like, Providence. They sent BLG, and the rest of the teams I really didn't think were that good, compared to the LCK. Like, what the LCK sent in terms of those top 3 teams were unbelievable. Like going in, like, T1 obviously were the most, like, fickle in terms of, like, going into the tournament. They didn't look the best after going 5 games with KT. But, like, after a couple of the games in, like, group stages and watching them, like, play, you're like, right, it's happening. They're looking pretty good, and then you know the first like the quarterfinals, and it's like they look really really good. So I'm not even trying to be like a doomer because I know the LPL super well. I just don't know what the next combination, like what the next like talent like solution like is, because they've tried so many different combinations, and they just can't seem to find like the correct like magic sauce. It's a little bit sad. The region's still mega fun to watch. I'm gonna keep watching it. It's just about it being the best, like the LPL overtaking the LCK or getting like the 3 or 4 like great teams. I just don't see it this year. I know a lot of people are excited for the off season, but I'm a bit tentative about where it's going to go.
I think there is even a reframing to do, because I tend to agree with what you say, because I think like we kind of lived through the same thing in a worse situation in Europe, and I think that's NA. I mean, it's past that, right? It's at the point where the league has a different shape. It's much closer to a minor region at this point. I think that the problem, it's like the celebration. What makes Faker and T1 so good, right, is as well what plagues a little bit the industry, because if you look at all the storylines outside of the old SKT versus Samsung Galaxy or T1 versus Gen.G, right, if you put these two teams aside, the rest of the world has been fighting for Worlds for 4 years. All the storylines that you do know, like LPL being a contender to win Worlds, the Damwon era, G2 being a contender to win Worlds, all these things pretty much happened during the 4 years T1 was rebuilding and Gen.G was rebuilding. The rest has been pretty much just a fight between two teams. It's just the history of SKT and the history, right? The legacy of SKT. And Gen.G still taking over today, right? Like we haven't been past Faker. And so you're in a position where the only thing that can beat these rosters produced by Korea is the Korean salary cap. Like the only hope for end of this like total domination of the League of Legends esports industry by the legacy of T1 and the legacy of Samsung Galaxy is literally just the salary cap, because I don't think Korea is going to be able to maintain T1 nor produce a second HLE. I know like the guys and Gen.G, the players, although Gen.G is like I think the third most expensive team in Korea, and player consented to have a lower salary to play together. I think this type of talent concentration is not going to happen as much in Korea anymore. But I think, to your point, that there is a clear imbalance, fundamental imbalance in the production of talents between Korea and the rest of the world. It kind of like, we thought it was fixed with like the emergence of people like Knight and Ben. But overall, right, and I think the support point is a really good proof of that from Thorin. Like, yeah, there's not such as a top level support in China. I don't think Korea is matched whatsoever. I think that we are pretty much, the gap is now not closing, but it's like increasing between Korea and China and the rest of the world is as well increasing. So you have these kind of islands, floating on their own. And the state of the future of League of Legends, and kind of come back to the hot take I've made, I think it was 2 episodes ago when I was like, or 1 episode ago, if T1 wins, it's great for the T1 fans, it's great for the legacy, it's great on the moment, but what do we move forward with coming for the next years? Because you look at like these T1, even if they don't, right, they kind of part ways and they scatter across Korea. Korea still has like 300 or 400 more talents than anyone else in the world. And they're going to be able to produce at least 2 or 3 top-level competitive teams. Whereas in China, you can shuffle Yagao and Knight one more time and maybe get like aiming back or something or missing. But the level of players they have, and it's not enough versus the people that are in Korea. So the future looks pretty sad for me, because this T1 roster, the only thing that's going to beat it is actually the Korean salary cap. Like, you never see a team beat that roster at Worlds. And we don't even have the time to produce contenders, because the only thing that's going to make them part away is the Korean salary cap. And that's kind of how the story ends.
I will say, by the way, that is the thing where I always feel sorry for people whose only esports game is League of Legends. Because I can tell you, one of the most satisfying things, if you're a fan of a game like Counter-Strike, is not only do all the teams play each other regularly, but you never get what you just set up there, Zaboutine. You never get a thing of like, and this was the most unbeatable team ever. But in fact, the only time ever you could say this happened was technically the Na'Vi team that was on top when the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. Technically, people say that sort of limited it, because obviously all the players, like half of them were Russian, half of them were Ukrainian. If people don't know, you can imagine that added like a strain to them winning, and they weren't the best after that. But aside from that, in history, in Counter-Strike, we basically always dethrone our champions. Like, we get to see, like, when an era ends, you lose, you go to a major and you get banged in, or you have 3 or 4 tournaments where you don't beat that rival team. But I have to agree, the shittest thing about League is the idea that if they like break this lineup up now, well, first of all, even if they break this lineup up, no one ever gets a chance to properly dethrone this team at Worlds. That sucks. You don't know, like, would they ever have lost? But then also, similarly, let's say they kept this lineup together, it was still good. Well, now you'd also think, like Zaboutine just said, maybe that's because Gen.G and Hanwha Life had to like shed a contract or get a cheaper player or get a rookie. That does kind of suck. I'm with you on that one. The problem is, on the take of like the LPL being worse, I agree and I don't agree. Here's where I agree, Keire. It is worse because, like I just said about the support problem, that it does seem like every lineup, and the only reason I think BLG doesn't get counted in this is because on paper, BLG and last year's JDG, two of the only lineups I've ever seen from China where every player was really good in general. Even then, by the way, I think it's aged fabulously. I was one of the people coming into this world who wasn't an unbeliever, by the way. I think I ranked him very low on my team. I didn't even I think I had him on like the C or B tier, and everyone else was telling me like I have a lot of respect, by the way, for like Keire and Doc. Bro, they were having him like fucking top.
I can't believe it
top
was set.
3 or something insane, like top 2 support in the world. I was like, what, bro? This guy's a serial inter, but okay, whatever. I guess they're just taking the upside of his play, you know. So I do think that, but I would phrase it this way, Keire. The saddest thing is, I agree on the salary cap angle, but the problem I hate about the LPL to this day is this, right? It only is the case that essentially, I'll give you, here's the quick analogy. You know, famously, the reason why Americans try to argue that they're like capitalist free market system. It's not in any way a free market system, by the way. It's basically like an oligarchy, but okay. If you imagine they had a free market, what they tried to argue is that in a free market, this is a classic capitalist argument. They say the reason it works is if we're all trying to be selfish, it'll sort of even out. And in the end, like we'll have to like work together on business deals, for example. So we can be selfish, but in the end it works. That doesn't work for roster construction. Because what happens in the LPL, I think it's the LPL here's the take for you. LPL's problem, Keire, is they've been like last year's LEC the whole time. If you actually said your mission, the LPL, isn't make a bunch of lineups, it's just beat the LCK and win worlds, you'd never make these rosters except like JDG or except maybe BLG. Because what they always do instead is they take, here's the difference. All the best players in the LCK play in the top 5 teams. Like all of them. Bro, even like BDD's on like the 5th or 6th best team. Like all the best players. There's not a single truly great player. Like back in the day, you had like Keane and Summit were off on like the shitter team. Yep. That doesn't exist in the LCK now. They do a really good job of talent stacking. LPL is a criminal for talent stacking. The LPL will take like, unironically, like the 30 best LPL players and put them on 8 teams. And you're like, bro, what? Like, again, like I've always said, the great example is like Jackie Love. It's like, why has he got Paolan and Mark as his support in a region where even if we're talking about not having supports, you've got Ming and Mako, and you can keep going. Like, bro, they're never pairing these players. So I think part of it's GMing, unfortunately. Like, if you notice, they even seem in the LPL to make what I think is the worst style of GMing, which is you always announce a massive name. You'd be like, I've got Ruler. And so every fan's like, oh my God, we've got Ruler, we're going to win worlds. And then it's like they'll quietly be like, and he's partnered with Mark, and you're like, no, what the fuck? Why are you even getting him then? Like, you know, like if I'm like, that's like the worst fucking like bait and switch of all time, but that is what they do every off-season, bro. In fact, I even admit this fully. I will totally admit it. Every time they make a sick roster in the LPL, there's always one name where I go, I guess that's all right. Ignore that. Get back to the Soul Laners. Soul Laners. Yeah, oh, sick. Look, this is amazing. There's always one scuff name. Like, I'll give you an example. Even that fucking Weibo lineup, which was like, wasn't even that great anyway. Like, you're just compromising. You're like, Breathe could be good if it's a Renekton. You know, why am I doing that? They're supposed to be going to Worlds. Like, so I sort of agree. I agree with the bigger picture, but there's the problem, though. I also think, I'll spin it one last way though. This is the way I'll spin it at the end. It goes like this. You are right, it's actually going to be a lot harder to win from the LPL because, spoiler, they've tried all the super teams and so far, by the way, not many of the super teams won. But it's actually going to be worse. But here's how you have to spin it to still make sanity worth maintaining, Keire. Technically, it is actually way better for someone like Knight, though. Because here's the pack. I know how angles work, mate. I do that thing like, if people know the character from The Authority, the Midnight, I imagine what the angle will be before the result. Here's what people don't realise. Imagine that BLG had won that tournament, Keire. You do realise, you're imagining in your world, right? Cool, now we can have all these cool conversations, right? Is Knight the modern day great player? No, everyone would just say this to you, Keire. They'd go, he had all the best players. Now, he didn't, but I'll tell you what, Bin's pretty insane. I think fucking Elk's pretty good. Again, I'm not a biggest On fan, but some people would say he was... they would say he had too much help. In a weird way, it will actually force Chovy and Knight to be even more cracked out to win, though, if you know what I mean, because they'll probably have to be even more of a carry.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay. Right, I've got one last take if we want to do one last one, boys. So let's see where you go on this one, because I'm going to do a spicy one with a historical component, right? If you think about the way this world's played out, I've been thinking about this. I went back and watched a few games. Even though BLG lost Worlds, they didn't win the tournament, guys. I actually think, for real, that this performance from Bin is like a top 2 Worlds performance ever. I'm going to say number 1 is The Shy, because I actually do think, if you ever watch Season 8 The Shy, like... I always say to, like, wondering, like, no one could have beaten him, bro. Like, you can have people coming out of time machines playing him, they'd all lose. Like, his hands were just at, like, a level that, like, his hands, and especially his balls, were just, like, inconceivable. Like, this guy, he had probably the biggest ego player ever, the Si-Season it. But aside from that, if you think about how Bin actually played in this tournament, what did he do wrong? Am I missing something? Like, I'll give you a list of everything he had. So first of all, he had unbelievable mechanics. Like, he looked better than every... by the way, I think Zeus is mega, but Bin's even better than him. Then you consider his picks. Bro, I don't care what anyone says. In these drafts, people were talking like Jax is unbeatable. No, only Bin's Jax is unbeatable. Everyone else is like good, but they have that like Jax is supposed to be. They have moments in the game where they're strong. They have moments where there's the valley. They have moments where if you catch them early and they're not fed, they're not going to do it. This guy was a nightmare the whole game if you ever had the Jax. By the way, it wasn't just the Jax. He could fuck around on anything. He could go on to the Gnar, whatever he wants to pick, but just play everything. Then you consider, he by the way, is one of the only players who did force the Jax. He would just force it every time it's available almost. Like, and by the way, you can see why. And then I'll add this in as well. Holy shit, this guy has to be in the same category as the Shy. The swagger isn't just the shit for the cameras, guys. I can tell this guy actually believes it. Like, you know, everyone can do that UFC thing where it's like, hey, you know, I'd knock him out, bro. Like, you know, no, he plays like he believes that. Like, in these games, I even feel for it. This is why I'm saying him, not Knight, by the way, Keire. Because here's the difference. There were the odd moments where I saw Knight not go into a team fight because he worried he'd die. I don't think Bin has ever pressed the brakes in his life in this tournament, bro. Every time, this guy played like the ego fucking Jax top laner in your solo queue game. He just went in every time. And if you don't follow him up, by the way, and he gets killed, that's your fault, not his. This guy was so swagged out. And then lastly, along those lines, bear in mind he lost, so sadly people won't give you credit for this. The way he played in Game 5, this guy has the biggest heart in the fucking world, bro. Like, he actually played for real, Game 5, like it was a throwaway solo queue game, and it doesn't matter if we win or lose this fight. He was going for it, bro. He was going really hard for this one. So I think, aside from the Shy who did win Worlds, I don't care who, take any of the players who won, Marin, Duke, fucking Cuvée, go down the list, bro. Fucking Flandre, none of these. I think Bin played better than all these fucking guys. He didn't even win the tournament. That's a real take. Thoughts?
I would say oh, sorry. Do you want to go first?
No, you go, Zaba.
Okay. I think my all-time favorite performance of a top laner at Worlds ever is actually from Bin, but it's not this year. I think that at the age of 17, doing a pentakill in Worlds Finals with Fiora against Prime Damwon is almost a bingo of the achievement you can do, right? It's like if you do a bingo, it's like, oh, who do you win? Prime Damwon, okay, and then pentakill, okay, which age? It's 17, top laner. So, and Fiora. So I think that's the when people ask me on in the French media, it's like I think this is the single best individual performance ever at Worlds. I mean, I don't see any other. So I would say that's still, like, for me the best performance from Bin, but he's overall because it's a one game, but overall on the span of a tournament, I think he's been the best player at the tournament with in terms of solo lanes. There's an argument, maybe. Yeah, I actually think so.
I don't even think it's close. That's how much I'm on Knight, by the way. Whoa, like
I think Knight played amazing. I think Bin and Knight played both amazing, but I would say, aside from the Jax versus Gragas Game 5, where really, like, Zeus, he was very prepared for this matchup, and I think it was very hard because Bin took it still, knowing it, right?
Oh,
and
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
You need to give the props to him.
Yep.
Because he knows, like, he's going to get counterpicked by Gragas. And if you look at the Q predicts from Zeus on Jax, on side lanes, it's insane. Like, this is the only time in the tournament where I really seen Bin kind of in distress in side lanes, like not being able to produce any game with Jax. Aside from that, I think that his ability to, like, impact team fights with Jax. You see all these guys, they take Jax, they go on side lane, they get 2 item, they jump into a team fight, they press E and they die.
Yep.
That's the average.
Oh, the amount of time he survives in these fights is crazy, bro. Like, he's just drawing people's attention for like 5 whole seconds. Yeah, it's crazy. And by the way, I also agree that's actually an underrated point you make. Most players who are like an ego carry top player like this, bro, they would just do what my boy Froggen did and just get the counter pick every game. They'd be like, give me the counter pick, I'll win all the... This guy would just lock it and just fucking play against whatever. He was a gangster.
So here's the thing, okay? Like, in terms of just like a pure like carry threat, he is only like comparable to the Shy in my opinion. Okay, but the two performances that I think are like just as like good, and I've not like went back and rewatched them that recently, particularly this one. Naguri's one where he wins with Damwon.
2020.
The stage is shit because there's no fucking crowd, so like.
Sure.
It's whatever, but like the utility, like who was playing fucking Lulu top at that like tournament? Like I know it's not like carry, but like the utility and the stuff that he was able to provide to his team, and he was also a sick carry player as well. And then I actually think at 2016 Worlds, it's not like that is approaching like peak unbelievable faker. He is outstanding at that tournament, but to beat Rox Tiger, there's basically no player that they could have had because he was literally the only person who could play against Smeb. Like
you mean Duke? You haven't said the name,
Duke,
but yeah, Duke.
Yeah, it's Duke. Like Duke is essential to that team because he like fundamentally like broke like. It is bullshit. Like that champion at the time, what's it called? The Echo Top. Echo Top was nonsense. Okay. Like it was absolute fundamental nonsense. But he was just he was the best abuser of the biggest pile of shit.
People don't know. Keire is talking about the era when they somehow managed to make Echo so you could just like build tank, but it still did damage and you could just get out. And it was actually the most nightmare fuel solo queue champion I think ever made. It was insane, wasn't it? Insane. So bad.
Like imagine you're just about to kill the tank, yes, exactly. And then he reverses time, and he's like, "I'm back!" And he mass stuns your team as well. Yeah. Like
it's horrible.
There was so many just like echo moments where you were just like, how is that even like possible? But I'll digress just to focus on like Ben here. I think Ben was unbelievable at this tournament. He was like, I don't want to detract from him. The only thing, and because me and Nymira and Rich all came back to each other, like when we went to like talk. His like Jack's team fighting, like late game in some of the games was like really, really strange where he would like was like mispositioning or like mistiming and like getting him skilled, and he's usually like killer on it. And you've seen it in game 5 where he catches Guma and he does the sidestep on the Poppy ult to then kill. That is unbelievable, and that was like a throwback. But for the whole tournament, he had some like really.
Oh, by the way, that's even one thing that is so sick. If you're bin, it's like, bro, that moment when he like dodges the Poppy, it's like that's supposed to be his faker moment where he like wins worlds off that, and we're all like, whoa, the greatest players, and that would be like in the next Riot music video. So, but everyone is going to forget that moment because he lost that game. For real, it's going to be like some fucking Blade Runner, like lost like Tears in Rain or whatever. Like, he's just going to forget that moment. That was fucking unbelievable, that play, mate. It was bonkers, wasn't it?
Yeah, and this is where I more fundamentally agree with the point that like there is very few carry top lane performances like this, because everyone forgets, by the way, about this, right? The amount of people that like the quality of like people that like Ben played at this tournament was actually really, really high, and actually in all the individual games it was unbelievable. Whereas when the Shy won Worlds, like his like quality of opponent wasn't as good outside Smeb, and that was, but it was not peak like Kino Smeb. And the other thing is he was also getting like subbed in and out of the fucking top lane in like certain like situations because he was just doing like fucked up things in draft, and he still had a couple of the Shy moments but yeah, this is like a hallmark like great performance from BLG. But that's the thing, Thorin. That's what made me predict like against them, because League of Legends hasn't been the best players for years now. Even though BLG are the best team, are the best have the best players. Yeah. It's like they're not the best like team, unfortunately. But he was fucking unbelievable at this tournament. The only thing that I could say about like Ben that was really, really strange was his like Gnar game in game 4 was like not bad, like comically bad, but it was quiet. Like he never actually came to a team fight with Gnar bar on.
True.
The only time he ever got a Gnar ult off was at top lane where T1 turret dived him. And I've like, because we don't get POVs, like you can never answer this question. You just don't know why it's happening. Like, I wonder why, what was going on that he couldn't get his Gnar, because his Gnar's has like other like god tier, can't lose the game like pick. And so it was very, very strange to see that kind of like flutter into like the night. Very strange.
By the way, I'll also throw this in there as well. I am almost certain that like this guy is the only guy who could play the Jacks like that. Because here's the thing, Zaboutine. If other people could do that in scrims, it would have been banned. That tells me players are just thinking like, but I've played so many Jacks. It's like, oh, we'll figure out a way. We'll take the counter pick, or we'll take a different jungle pick. Like, I actually think for real, coaches almost just let this guy play, and fuck, he almost stole worlds from him, bro. He almost actually won this motherfucker.
Yeah,
that's I feel like especially the champion Jax is a very misunderstood champion by most of the competitive industry. I think he's considered like a kind of a hyper scaling monster that wins team fight late game and stuff like this, like super good bruisers. But he has very like precise spikes on which he's like a monster, but he has a lot of like holes as well during in his curves. And I think Ben is the only player that like has been able as well, probably in the training, to communicate around these spikes and these moments. Because you see BLG, like they will play a Drake, and then you see Ben on the side lane farming because he's been, you know, behind from a swap lane. And then BLG is just gonna play like push and pull and kind of just delay the enemy team around Drake, but Ben's never like joining. You see all these top laners just like press TP immediately, watch the Drake being taken, do nothing, lose 2 waves on side. Like he's finding these ways like, guys, we're not playing this Drake, I'm coming back for the next one, and he gets his item, starts to put pressure because he has his spike on the enemy top laner, then like BLG goes to Baron, and then he makes this TP play, flanks the ADC, wins the game of that. Like, it's not only, and I think that's like the misunderstanding, is like people think Bin is just a monster in terms of like hands, but I think he's one of the very few.
Smart. Oh, he's unbelievably intelligent.
He has the legacy, right? Oh. Even maybe more than the Shy is like his understanding of like top lane timings and top lane impacts as a carry is unmatched in the history of League.
He times, what do you call it, night summoner spells for him, by the way. Just so a little point, if you don't know this, by the way, guys. Ben does I'm not joking, I've watched the POVs. The 2 people that time summoner spells in BLG are On, who does it for bot side, and Ben, who does it for top side, because Knight refuses to do it. It's 2 above him.
Obviously, the joke there for On is he just does that because his flash is on cooldown permanently, so he just got into the habit of like, oh, when's it coming back? I just wasted it.
You have a lot of time when you're dead.
Yeah, exactly. They go, while he's got the grey screen, he just texts the timer, exactly. The joke tricked himself for that one.
And if you've ever watched like a Ben POV, it's literally like a faker like POV.
Oh, he's watching the rest of the map, right?
Yeah, but what he's actually doing is he's constantly moving his screen, looking for TP animation. Because if you look at you can't see it on your minimap, but if you actually physically move your camera, you can actually see the TP onto wards, even if it's
right.
And so he's constantly looking to see if people are TP flanking him when he's in side lanes. Like, this guy's POVs are actually transcendently, like, you could learn so much from this guy. It's like Downbeat-esque.
Oh, by the way, you do know as well the reason why. It's not just that he plays champions like Jax, but I think half the reason why people make it sound like he's a hands-on guy is because his whole demeanour makes him seem like he's the tough guy, doesn't he? So I think people don't give him credit as actually being smart. Because I know what you mean. His feel for the game's unbelievable, mate.
Yep, unbelievable. Like he's genuinely like China was basically lucky. Like he has like just a transcendent like talent. Like there are very few players ever born like Ben, and they're just lucky to have him. I can't wait because he's still relatively young in his career.
Sure.
Like, and it's gonna be sick to watch him.